Hey, so today we're going to talk to a rep that was referred as one of the best reps out there. I did this post on LinkedIn, and I want to continue this because I think the distinction that we're finding from other reps are more valuable than the experts in some cases. I've done a lot of experts interviews and 11 years of podcast interviews. So make sure you're downloading the episodes that you want or all of them because the podcast players only store 300 of them. And you probably want more than 300 of them. That's their rule, not mine. And if you download them, you get to keep them forever. They're yours. And that only goes back 3 years, three of the 11. Hey, I've been giving a lot of free content out here. All this help I'm giving you. But today's journey is about a rep that started like a lot of us. He sold retail. The mobile phone kiosk that you see in the mall, he did that. And now he's selling $1 million deals. We're going to be talking about one $13 million deal today, as well as others, and getting into how sales is different depending on how you sell, what it takes, both mindset, skill set, understanding what's important, trying to get away from just platitudes and get into the brass tacks of it. And that is where we want to be. If you're in B2B sales, you're putting in the hours. Standing at that kiosk is harder than closing a $13 million deal. It's hard to believe that, but I've done it. I sold shoes in high school. Although it was fun and it was an adventure, it was the first time I was on commission and I liked it. You had to stand up all day. You had to stand up in a suit all day. You had to put a big smile on your face, and you didn't work your hours. You worked the hours that people buy shoes, which is like after work, lunchtime, and on the weekends. And there goes your social life. So I think you're going to enjoy this journey. Before we get into it, make sure you check out our friends over at CoVideo. Try out CoVideo. Just download it, see if it works for you. Do a couple, send them to friends, send them to me. Send them to the CoVideo people and ask for feedback. They also have a tremendous amount of content on how to do video right. Little tips and techniques. And I've had Margaret on the show. She's one of the experts over there. She's been there since the beginning. And she taught me a lot. And there's little things, smiling, keeping eye contact with the person, not your computer. Looking for visual signals of interest or distraction, how to keep somebody engaged. And, it's been proven that when you do a demo with video where they can see you, the close rate seems to go up because it breaks through that know, like, and trust barrier. And it's just one technique. It maybe is not best for the first contact, but as you build up the relationship with the person. Also, at the very end, I'll talk about winning the complex sale and how it fits into what we talked about today in the interview. Let's get started. Hey, Jordan, welcome to the show. Is where you getting started. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Brian. I'm happy to be here. Well, like my name's Jordan Sandberg. I was born and raised here in Utah. I lived pretty much my entire life here in Utah, except for 2 years. I lived down in South America for 2 years in Colombia. I've got three boys and a dog named Pablo, so I'm really happy about that. I got my hands full.
Yeah.
I studied technical sales at Weber State. I did not all the way finish because I got married, had a kid, and bought a home within like a really, really short period of time, like ridiculously short. Got a sales job and really started learning like this is the way your life's gonna go. You're gonna be in sales, and so you better jump into
Whether
it.
you
So
like it or not.
yeah, I did actually have the ambition to be in sales, but that definitely propelled it. When you buy a house, have a child, I mean, in such a short period of time, it was like, I got to get going. I can't be selling cell phones anymore. So I actually started out selling cell phones for a couple of years when I was going to college. And then I worked in the staffing industry for 13 years. And that's where I really got my business to business, outside sales experience, the crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. And then for the past 5 years, I've been selling call center software, and working from home. So it's been nice.
Cool. And how long did it take to kind of feel at home in sales? 13 years?
Am I at home? So sales is the greatest and the worst job in the world. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
When you're doing well and you're making money, I'm going to do this forever. Why would I ever want to go into management? Why would I ever want to be a rocket engineer? Why would I want to do anything?
Else, yeah.
And then you have a bad year and you're looking at being a high school track coach, or you're trying to like, get out of it and do anything
I want to be
else.
a monk.
I'm gonna go into the seminary. I'm gonna go be a preacher. Like, I will do anything but sales. For me, unfortunately, my personality is the way it is. So I think I kind of knew that I'm either going to do something sales related or something people related. I'm a little bit of a social butterfly. So
Yeah.
I think I was going that way. I never felt real uncomfortable with sales. What I didn't love is when I sold cell phones when I was going to college. I liked the experience of helping people and kind of making their world great, but it was very transactional, and it was you talk to somebody, they're going to make a decision within 10 or 15 minutes. They're going to leave the store. You're probably never going to see them again.
Right.
And so I wanted to actually work with like businesses and selling things that actually made a huge difference in their business and what they do, and that would be able to make more money.
Yeah.
I mean, there just wasn't that much money in retail sales. So
No, there isn't.
if that answers your question, I think it took me not too long, but I wanted to get into the business side real fast. I was agitated that I wasn't.
And, when I talk to people that are in B2C or retail, and I see how hard they work, and I've done it. I did, and the income level, people don't believe it. They think you're trying to pull something over on them. And it's like, no,
Right.
No, just, search the internet. You can see the income ranges.
So I'll tell you just to that point, that's exactly why I left. So I was working at the names, it's been so long, it doesn't matter. I worked for AT&T. This was so many years ago, and I loved the job. It was fantastic, but it was the stuff you talked about. And my older brother, BJ, who partially recommended me for this interview, he was working at this staffing company, and I thought, I'm working just as hard as you. And he was telling me what he was making, and I was like, bro, I'm dying. Like, I'm working my tail off. I'm a pincushion. Like, people are coming in here mad because their phone didn't work on, some mountaintop somewhere down in the Tetons, and they come in and I've got to solve their issue. Like right now, like, this is really difficult. So I knew I wanted to get into sales because I felt like the effort level was about the same, or business to business, because the effort level was about the same, but the payoff was dramatically different. And that's what drove me out.
Yeah. And what does your sale look like today? Is it a large dollar
Pretty
amount?
Strategic. Yeah, it's large dollar amount. I'm on our strategic enterprise team. So I only have, a very select small amount of accounts and companies that I sell to, about 6.
Yeah.
And the deal ranges, I mean, they could be anywhere from $1 million to 15 million.
Wow.
They're really, really large, and they take a long period of time. So then there's the opposite end of this spectrum, which is you go from making somebody happy, selling something to them in 10 minutes, to something that may take a year, 18 months, sometimes 2 years, because it's so strategic. There's like players all over the place, and it just takes a long, long, long time.
Yeah. A lot of people can't live with, a lot of people like the transactional thing, the strategic thing. I mean, it's a roller coaster.
Oh, it is. It is. Because, I mean, let's just take last year, for example. It was a really good year for me, and it happened in the fourth quarter. And so I worked my tail off and took abuse all year, personally and professionally. It's like, how's it going? How's it going? How's it going? It's going well. It's going well. And I've got all these things, and this is my plan, and this is how it's going. And, we closed a significant amount of business in that fourth quarter. This is just kind of a funny story, but I was at like 90% of my goal in, I don't know, October, November. And then I closed another huge amount the final day of the year. So as you can imagine, the amount of pressure that like goes into that, because the last, the day before the last day of the year, you're wondering, like, if this deal slips, goes to next year, I don't know what my comps plan is going to be
Oh, I
like. I
can
don't know
tell you
what's
what it
going
will
to go
be.
on. Yeah. I mean, it's like, it has to like, what do I have to do? So there's a lot of that goes into it, that in strategic long-term sales, some people just aren't built for it.
Right.
They need something to eat,
Every day.
weekly.
Yeah.
And not just the money, but like the
success,
mindset. Yeah, the success. Like,
feedback.
hey, I closed something today. Cool.
Yeah.
Let's work on that tomorrow. And me, it's like, hey, you might close something, a few times a year.
And is that the nature for the whole company or just your territory?
My team in particular,
Yeah.
it's more lumpy. I mean, we do everything we can to make it not lumpy, but my team, it is more that way. And then as you go down in terms of like company size and the ranges that they're selling to, they get a little bit faster. But I sell call center software, so that stuff doesn't just like pop off the shelf
Flip.
like in one day.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, you're a handsome, good looking guy, you seem like a good reputable company, let's give you a shot. Like, it just doesn't happen.
Let's start Monday.
Yeah. That's how staffing was, right? Staffing was the world I came from. In staffing was, hey, that guy looks great, or gal, that person looks great, they fit the bill, let's give them a try. If we don't like them halfway through the day, I can call you and tell them I don't need them anymore. So it was a shift to go from that to something so strategic that takes a long time to sell.
And so how many deals, like when you look at your pipeline, are you working on at once? Real deals?
Well, the best answer is as many as possible. Never enough, right? But I would say, let's just take last year, for example. I worked on 5 significant size deals all year, and I closed 3 of them.
Okay.
And
wow.
and it was magical.
Yeah.
But this year I'm working on more, but they're maybe not as promising. It's a little bit more challenging. So anyways, if that gives you a little bit idea.
And what people, I mean, they hear about the win, but when you make 6, 12, 18-month investment on something that doesn't happen for whatever reason.
Oh yeah. Right.
They stick with what they do. They go out of
Exactly.
business. Who knows? Stuff you have control over, stuff you don't have control over.
It's so true. And that happens. I mean, it's happened. Again, this last year was great. The year before was great too, but it had a heartbreaker at the end of the year. And it was just like this. It was, hey, we've put all this time in. I've invested not only my time, but my teams and engineers, and all these people have come, and right down at the end, and it's like, it's not happening. Now what? It's like, I don't know. I'm going to jump off a bridge. I don't know.
Right. And have you come up with little signals, symptoms of when you know it's going to happen, other than you have the order, right? You can kind of work backwards. Are they committed to a date? Is the person...
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a great question. I think, yes. The answer is, in my business, once you kind of get going, after you've been working with someone for a period of time, the questions turn to, when do you want to close this? Because it's a big deal to them too. It's not just something that they may or may not do. It's going to impact their career. And so when they're putting the time into you, then the questions turn into, when do you want to close it? And what is the likelihood that it's going to be my company? And usually what I see is, for the first little while, it's very, it could be you, it could be your competitor, it could be this person over there. We don't know. And then once they kind of get past that vetting process, you'd think that they'd want to close, but then there's like, they kind of cut the competition out, and then it's, okay, we like you, we're convinced that it's you, but can we really do it with you? Now we've got to really put a whole nother thing in. And yeah, we put close plans together and have dates, and we'll say, okay, our date is November 16th, and coincidentally that's my birthday, let's make sure it's that day. And Right. So we do all that we can to try to work backwards from that. And it helps tremendously. Because if
Yeah.
they're uncomfortable with that, you
You
know
want to
that
surface. Yeah,
it's
you
not
want
going
to
to,
know.
yeah, it's not a good sign. Yeah, it's not a good
Yeah.
sign.
Yeah, because I mean, the larger the deals, all of a sudden, all these people start popping up at the last minute. It's like, who's cousin Harry and what's he thinking? There's somebody on
Exactly.
the board wants you to look at something else.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, my heartbreaker last year, that's what happened. At the very final end, it was like, hey, this one thing kind of happened, and it actually, it didn't go away forever. It just delayed it because, yeah,
Yeah,
John Doe comes in at the final hour and he's like, hey, I don't like this one little piece of your software. I mean, this happened last year where right at the end, I want to say we were going through legal documents and everything, going through everything, and someone surfaced and said, I don't know that this particular part of the software is going to work with my division. So next thing you know, I'm pulling engineers back in and they're doing demos, and yeah, because there's like 50 people involved. It gets a little crazy.
it gets, yeah. And I always tell people it's like the default is for either not happen, delay, or minimize. I don't know if that fits where they buy as little as possible. I don't know if that's an option, or start
Can
over.
be. Start over is painful, isn't it?
You're like, well,
Oh
wait a second.
gosh.
Somebody else comes in, muddies the water, or there's, somebody. Did you look at these guys? And you're like,
Yep,
and because people get scared.
they do. When you've got a purchase order that you're asking for that's $13 million, the amount of vetting that goes into that is not just, hey, John and Sue, they're convinced, let's do it. There's just so much pressure. And then, yeah, at the final end, it's like, hey, I think we're convinced, but we hired a new guy and he really loves this other company. We should at least take a look at him.
Right.
I mean, it's rough that way for sure. And so that's why I'm a um, the software that I sell is very technical. It does so many things that, frankly, I'll never be able to fully understand. I'm not an engineer, right? And I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with that. But that's why I think it's so important to just have a really, really solid relationship of trust and let them know, like, my job isn't just to sell you something. Like, I'm going to help you find any information that you want.
Yeah.
And so if you have a doubt about a piece of our software, I'm likely not going to answer that. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm going to get a non-salesperson and they're going to come in and talk to you. And anyways, I think relationship is key. And if you can have a relationship of trust, you can get through those hurdles. But towards the end, when it's really crunch time and they're putting their career on the line to buy something that costs millions of dollars, they better trust you or it's just not happening. It just won't.
And how, or what were kind of some of the stages you went through as a rep? Because going from staffing, which is a little bit transactional, very relationship, and you're kind of in the middle. You've got a
Oh yeah.
customer, and then you got a client, you got a candidate,
Right.
and you got to play
Right.
matchmaker, and
I
it's
love
always your fault, and it's like,
it.
right.
Did you sell staffing? Did you used to sell it? You've
Well,
just
I
heard
got a
about it.
lot of friends who were headhunters, and I
Oh,
thought
nice.
about doing it a long, long time ago,
Yeah.
but but I've been the candidate and I've been the hiring manager, and so
So what's the transition? I'm
well,
sorry. Go ahead.
some of the stages that you went through, because now you're kind of ultra enterprise rep, multiple seven figures, right? Not many people can do that. That's not order taking.
I
Nothing
got you.
happens by accident. You don't get inbound for a $13 million deal, right?
Right. Right. I understand what you're saying. So, what did the stages look like? Um,
Because like when I did it, I I had this stupid belief that when I get so good, I was going to call on the CEO, have a 1 hour meeting with him,
and just
walk him down
close
to
it up.
procurement. That's how naive I was. And then
say it can't happen, right?
Well, then I went back to being well, I was an engineer and I spent my whole summer integrating all our hardware with their hardware. And then my CEO came in and did a $30 million deal. So I thought it was just that moment of his presentation that did it. But it was, that VP of that division looked at his engineers. Could we do it without this product? And they said no.
Yeah.
So it became, all the groundwork was done.
Right. I hear what you're saying. And you're right. It takes a process to go from selling cell phones in an AT&T retail store, selling little old ladies text messaging. Like, hey, I mean, back in those days, text
It was
messaging was like
expensive.
you were buying 500 for $5.
Yeah.
Kids are sending 500 before they even get out of bed, right?
Yeah.
Before they've even
It's not a
opened their
cost.
eyes, right? Right. So that was my sell back then. I remember my manager at the time. I was priding myself in being kind of a top producer at the time. And she's like, you're a follower. I'll never forget this. She was so powerful. She goes, you're a follower. I hired you because I thought you were going to like sell all of our features and all of our extra stuff. And I'm like, I can't believe you just called me a follower. Like, that is not me. I'm a leader. And she's like, well, you won't sell text messaging. You won't do this. You won't do that. So anyways, what are the stages? I think I had very good people in my path that helped guide me and lead me to be the best salesperson that I could be. View it as not just a transaction, but a relationship forming experience that was going to help them do whatever it is that I was selling. And then it took effort on my part to commit to the bigger deals. And most people don't want to do that. So
Scary.
For example, when I was in staffing for the first, I want to say it was for the first maybe year or so, maybe 2 years, I would literally sell anything to anyone. So it's like, if they have a building and there's an employee in it, I would ask them, are you going to hire someone in
Are
the
you
next
lonely?
5 years? Yeah, I could hire someone in 5 years. I'm coming down. Like, I'm going to come down to your building. You're going to need me at some point.
Oh.
And so I did that for a while. And then I grew this pretty huge list of customers, but they were all small. I was like one guy here, two guys here, one guy here, or one person here. And over time I was like, man, this is really hard. Like, I don't know that I could be as successful as some of these other people if I don't commit to these bigger deals. Yeah. And so I had enough residual in the bank that I thought, okay, now I'm going to start committing to the larger companies. And so my company didn't tell me to do that. Frankly, they didn't want me to. But so I started to look at staffing instead of, okay, I'm not just going down to the ABC company that needs 2 people. I'm going to strategically look for this company that needs 100 every year, or they have an on-site recruiter that is there all the time that constantly has a revolving door. That would be a great account. It's going to take a long time to get in there, but if I get in there, it'll be great for me. So then the rest of my years in staffing, I kind of focused on being the large account guy. I mean, that's what it was called at that.
The elephant
that's
hunter.
Kind of how we wrote. Yeah, it was like, hey, he's the big account guy. That's what he likes to do. And most of the time it paid off. And sometimes it was like, man, you got to get something to eat. But I loved it. I enjoyed it. And it taught me to be more strategic, even in a transactional type environment. And so then when I took the leap from staffing to selling software that had millions of dollars, I could say to these managers and these directors and VPs that I interviewed with, is I was a large account guy. I know what it's like to be strategic. I'll take the time. If it takes 6 months or if it takes a year, I've done it. And I kind of keep this other stuff going on the side to keep everybody happy. But my love is the big stuff. And so that's what made it good for me, because 90% of the people I worked with in staffing were amazing. This is not a shot at them, but they didn't want to take that risky road that I took. Yeah, because it's risky and it's hard. Yeah, it's way hard when you're looking at a company that's got 300 temporaries on site. To get in there is so much more challenging than going down to the road, talking to Bob in the mechanic shop and saying, come on, Bob, when you need a machinist, I got you. And they're both fun and they're both rewarding.
Yeah.
But if you break a deal and then you get to say, hey, I'm going to put someone on site and that's going to pay me for the next 5 years, no brainer for me.
Right. But the bigger deal, the enterprise deal, isn't so much about the chit chat. It's about what are
Right.
you doing for their career?
Exactly.
Finding the person who has the problem you solve, understanding what their
Yep.
personal win is, and
No
aligning,
doubt.
yeah, and then working the way up the org with them, and,
Right.
and and trying to determine, who's got the juice and who doesn't.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a real tough one. I felt like I knew that so well in staffing. I felt like I knew who the decision maker was. I'm not afraid. I'm bold. And then when I fully made the leap into this enterprise stuff, there was still learning to do. So
It's like,
I mean,
what?
cause I got in and I'm like, no, this is our guy, or this is our, this is our gal. Are they?
Well,
I
that's it,
mean, can
because
they really close it?
I had a friend. He tried to explain the complex sale was just a set of simple sales, and I'm like, no, not really. You
I
know,
don't think so.
it's
I don't
you've
think so either.
you've got to understand how a company buys and makes decisions, because
Yeah,
typically the person you're dealing with hasn't done a deal like this before.
it's very possible. I mean,
How many? Yeah,
I can tell you two stories in particular that the manager, when we closed, like when basically once the curtain was completely open and it was like, you're in, like I'm doing everything I can to close this deal. It was made very clear to me, this is going to help me get promoted or get me fired. And so now you're not selling it. Basically what it was you're not selling to me anymore. We're in this together,
together,
and it
partners in
has
crime.
to go well. It has to go well. You cannot screw this up. And it's like, I'm not, I'm your guy, right? But it was different than trying to
Right.
sell and convince, because it's like, hey, I'm going to actually put this on my resume. This is going to be something that I'm going to say, I made a purchase. It was X amount of dollars. This is how it transformed our company. And if you screw this up, you're gone,
Yeah.
basically.
And to now, you got to understand all of these different people, and you might not be the right guy to negotiate with legal. You might not be the right
Yeah, I'm
guy
not.
to talk to the board or the CFO, and giving different payment options and leasing options, and the time value of money and the ROI, and how are they going to justify this, and how is it going to pass the audit, and all of these things. Great salespeople. I made that early in my career. I started working with my CEO,
Yeah.
and he was a Stanford MBA, and I would just drive him around at the end of the quarter, and I'd get in to meet the CEOs of all the customers, and he was like a JFK creature. He could just get up there, and he was charismatic and
Yeah.
stuff. But what I learned watching him present, it was never about the product. It was about the future of their company, not ours, theirs.
Pretty amazing, isn't it?
And then all of a sudden, I'd leave, and the CEO would call me the next day, the customer, and say, "When can Paul come back again?" Right? Because
Oh
it
my
was,
gosh. So true.
and it's like, well, let's get a deal, and we'll do another one next quarter.
That's good. That's good. So the one point I want to make and just agree with you on is um, going from, you said you've asked a couple of questions, the stages, and then the thing you said about being the right person to do every step.
Yeah.
I feel so when I went from staffing, that was another major, major shift in staffing. I did it all. I sat
Right.
down with Brian. Brian, what do you need? Here's your requirements. Here's the contract. You sign it. It costs $20,000. Here you go. We're done. I'm going to go back, find the person. I'm going to bring them in, and it's great. Now the environment that I'm in is I'm just a quarterback. I might not run the ball one freaking yard, and
Yeah.
it was real challenging because I like to
Run the ball.
Yeah, I like to run, man. I mean, I'm used to
Give me
like
the ball.
doing stuff, and it's like, you have a really good question. That's a good question for my, the director of professional services. That's a great question for my solutions consultant. That's a great question for whatever. And it's been challenging for me because I almost feel muffled at times because my job is just to quarterback the whole way
You're kind of
through,
the
and that's
concierge of
challenging.
the deal.
Yes, that's a better way to say it.
The Sherpa kind of guiding it.
Yes.
You kind of got to know what to do, but you don't have to necessarily do it.
Right.
Because usually the best salespeople is either on the board, the investors, the CEO, the VP of engineering, the CIO, these people who are like experts at little niches, and they're great for a half hour, 45 meeting. Just put them in, take them out.
Plug and play. You're in. All right, let's get you out of there.
Mission accomplished. Okay, put them in an
I'll
Uber and head them back to the airport.
Okay, I gotta tell you a funny story about this. And this guy is so good. Okay, so this is not meant to be disrespectful, and I won't mention his name anyways, but he was so awesome and he was so good with customers. But it was so funny because this was back in the day, and we were coming out of the time frame of like no contracts. So it was like he probably sold in the time where it was like, yeah, just shake hands, man. Shake hands. You look at me in the eye. I look at you in the eye. We're walking out of here. I'll have somebody for you on Monday. And so that was the era that he grew up in. And so I have him on a meeting, and he flat out told this person, he was like, yeah, I don't need contracts. I don't need you to sign anything. He's like, let's just agree right now to what we're doing. And the guy loved it. He was like, yeah, let's do it. And so as we're walking out the door, I'm like, I'll be back later. We actually do have a contract because I can't place anyone out here without a services agreement. But anyways, to your point, like, yeah, you've got to be willing to pass the ball and recognize that it's not about you, especially in those enterprise sales. Because I wouldn't say complain, but last year I talked to my boss a couple times. I'm like, man, sometimes I'm wondering, like, what am I doing? And she, it's like, well, you've done a great job. And it's like, yeah, I have, I guess, because I've brought in all the right people. But I'm like, man, I want to feel like I'm in the boxing match, like I'm throwing punches too. And it's like, that's not your role.
It's not your
when
role.
We go through the contract, you bring in legal, you prep them, you give them all the information that they need, you make sure they're successful, then they got to do their job.
Yeah.
And so it's been hard for me to swallow, and I'm 5 years deep into that world. So I get what you're saying. It's hard.
Yeah. And how do you distinguish yourself against other salespeople, either competitors or salespeople
in terms of like
skill.
Personality? Oh, skill.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a hard one because I don't want to come across as seeming that I think because I get value from everybody.
Right, but some people rely solely on their personality. Other people understand others' drivers. They're more strategic. They know what's going to happen. They anticipate the next step.
I think in terms of, comparing me to others or my skill level, I would say that it's pretty high. I mean, I think I have the.
But what's the distinction?
Oh, between skill and personality?
No. Between yourself and somebody who's not going to win that deal. I mean, I'm sure you sit through pipeline reviews and QBRs.
I understand now. I understand. I think one of the biggest differentiators for me is that I am always willing to go the distance. Always. I will never stop. I will just keep going. So I'm also an Ironman. So I don't know if you know what an Ironman is, but it's a 2.4 mile swim. Okay, so it's ridiculous. It's absolutely bonkers, but it's what I love to do, and I've been doing it for 10 years. So my personality fits really well with these long-term sales because it just lasts forever. You got to keep going.
How do you do that and sell at the same time? I try and get 5 to 6 miles in the morning, and I'm like,
It's super early in the morning. Now I've kind of laid off a little bit the last couple years, or actually, let's see, the last year and a half have been a little bit more challenging. But traditionally, I would get up at like 4 in the morning,
Holy
and I'd be on the
smokes.
road. I'd get 2 hours. I'd get an hour and a half to 2 hour bike ride, or a swim and a bike, or something like that, and then I would go home, quickly rinse, drive down to
Repeat.
Salt Lake. And yeah, it's like, all right, now I'm here, like get me some food, and I'm going to work all day, and then I'd be home by 6:30. Now that I work from home, it's enabled that to be easier actually, because if I get started at 8:30, I mean, I don't have to get up at 4 anymore. I
And how
just
many
don't.
races a year do you do?
So I've only done 2 full Ironmans, but I've done like 7 or 8 halves, and then
Halves.
40 Olympic distance. So like traditionally I like to do, when I was doing Ironmans, I did 1 a year. When I was doing halves, it was like 1 or 2. And then when I was doing the smaller triathlons, I was doing like 5 to 6 a summer. They were so much fun. So much fun. But you asked a serious question, like what's the differentiator? I think most of the time, partially, I'm too dumb to quit.
Well, the
So like
endurance
if
and the
a
stick with itness.
yes, you got to stick with it. And if a manager tells you, hey, I'm not interested now, it's like, to me, it's not as devastating. It's okay. It's not no, it's not right now.
Yeah.
And so, okay, let's keep engaging. And what can I do to further this down the road? Right. So I'll try to take every angle that I possibly can to make sure that I don't leave anything on the table. And I think most people get exhausted,
Yeah.
especially in enterprise sales. I mean, when you're looking at a year, year and a half, 2 years, it's like that thing ain't going anywhere. I mean, a couple of the deals I closed last year, they had been worked on by other people like years before. And it was like, oh, that company's really difficult, or they're hard. And I'm like,
They'll never buy.
maybe. I'm like, maybe. Yeah,
Maybe.
maybe.
Right.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. And I had a mentor whose saying was refuse to lose,
I love that.
and it was not just against competitors, but against doing nothing.
Yeah.
And
I think that's our worst comp, isn't it?
well, yeah. And it's just, I mean, the crazy crap that we did to close deals.
Oh yeah.
Like showing up with no appointment.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh man, I could tell you so many of those. The drop-ins, the cold stops is what I called them.
And there
Cold
was one New Year's Eve where I had it on speed dial, and he picked up at 7:30 at night, and he goes, "I see you've called here 37 times."
Oh
And I
my
go, "Is that all?"
God. You're like, well, you didn't realize I was outside with binoculars as well. Like I knew you were wearing a blue shirt yesterday.
And that sounds amateurish in some ways. But if you're adding value and you believe it's important to do and that it makes sense for them, that's key.
Amen.
Cool.
Amen.
Hey, it's been a fun
Can't be
conference.
embarrassed.
Fun.
Yeah, it has.
Oh, where can people go to follow you?
So I've got, oh, that's a good question. I mean, LinkedIn, Jordan Sandberg is my name. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm on all kinds of social media sites with Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to, yeah, I post a lot of stuff all the time. I need to pick it up a little bit on LinkedIn though.
Yeah, quit slouching. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure. You're a fantastic motivator. I love the stuff that you do. The funny stuff too rules. I hate to say it, man. The videos are great. Keep doing them. Thank you.
What a great guy. I mean, you hear the energy, and the triathlete thing came through because of a couple things. And I don't mean to say that you have to be an athlete or into athletics to be successful at sales. It's not that you're an athlete. It's that you have competed so that you either love to win or hate to lose, whichever motivates you. I don't think there's a right or wrong there. The other part is you typically have a coach or team members that you have to work with and take feedback from. So you can't get into the blame game because people are giving you feedback. And I think that the team part helps a lot because if you've ever been part of a team as a kid, that there's pressure, there's peer pressure that focuses you on doing the right thing, that gives you feedback, that doesn't let you hide behind your confirmation bias, your belief that you're right and someone's picking on you, that really pulls out, oh, your head's not in the game, you weren't paying attention, it didn't mean that much to you, whatever it is that you can improve on. The other part about certainly triathletes, and I've seen in athletics, is you get the physical energy, and you can't really argue with that because, and I've been a real proponent of this recently in my own life, is that if you can cut out some bad things and introduce some good things, you can get a couple of hours a day, and the hours that you would typically focus on work, you can be feeling better. You sleep better, you eat better, you exercise. And I look back at the great salespeople. A lot of them were physical. They were runners. They were people who did cardio. And it doesn't matter what form, and I'm not trying to say you have to do this or you have to do that. I'm looking for correlations. And if you have more energy than somebody else, because the worst thing you can do is get it from artificial forms, caffeine, sugar, things like that. Now, a little cup of coffee in the morning to get started is fine, but if you're pumping coffee at 3 in the afternoon, it might not help you sleep that night. And what you end up doing is your circadian, your daily cycle starts going down as far as energy instead of going up. So, and I also wanted to share that Winning the Complex Sale, that course is teaching you how these big deals work, how to keep the deal moving, how to prevent it from getting stuck, how to think about the whole deal, not just where you are and the next step. Your manager probably uses this question all the time. What is the next step? And that's a logical question. But what would be more powerful is map out where you want to be, how do you get to close, and how are you going to get there? What do you anticipate going wrong? Because the things that go wrong happen at the very end. You have a deal honeymoon. It's a lot like a courtship where, the first meeting is a little awkward. You don't know if it's a good match or not. It might be some excitement, some enchantment. And then you start going through a courtship, and all that's kind of fun and easy because the customer really doesn't have to do anything other than dedicate their time. They're typically not putting any money into it yet. You're putting your time into it, and you've got the big hope, especially on a big deal. But then as you get closer and closer to getting the order or going to the altar, the lawyers get involved. Prenup? You didn't tell me about a prenup. The legal part, the in-laws, the friends, the logistics, all this reality starts to smack us in the face. And guess what happens? Somebody gets cold feet, and it's typically the customer. How do you prevent that? How do you keep that courtship going? And the nature of the big deal is to not close. You have to get that into your head. And I'm not talking about renewals or upsells. I'm talking about a brand new customer where you're probably competing, where it's doing nothing is an alternative, whether they share it or not. How do you keep that moving? And if you look at your pipeline, how many of those deals are going to close within the window of your comp plan? Let me tell you a secret, and we touched on it a little bit in the interview. If you don't close a big deal by the end of your fiscal year, you know what management does? They just put it onto your quota for next year. They don't do it to be malicious. It's just human nature. If there's a couple $1 million, 100K out there, they know they can just easily slap it onto your quota because they know it's coming in. And if they don't do it, they're going to be like, well, we're going to be like paying him for it. And the problem is the game's already over. This is what happens in sales. And I don't encourage sandbagging, but I encourage forecast management and expectation management and income management. So if you want to get paid on a deal at this year's accelerators, you have to close it. If you don't close it, you don't get paid on it, essentially. Because if you do the math, if they add it to your quota next year, your multiple goes down. So the math doesn't work. So essentially, you did all that work and got nothing, and you still have to close it. This is the craziness of working for a company. So closing it is critical. And if you want to hear all the issues, because everybody who starts the course, and believe me, I've managed people, I've talked to people doing this 30 years who have either been able to get by on a brand, get by on relationships, get by on upsells, but when they go into a new deal with a new customer, a large dollar amount, multiple decision makers, time gaps in between communication, the default is to do nothing. The exception is to do something. So either you guide them through that process, they guide themselves, or it doesn't happen. Which one do you have control over? You only have control over you. So take control, go to b2brevenue.com, sign up, schedule a call with me. It'll pay for itself. You don't have to close even one deal for it to pay for itself. This is a skill that you can apply the rest of your career. And I'd say less than 1% of the reps understand this information. Apply it, less than 1%. Get it out of their head, less than 1/10 of 1%. Be that person, because that's the person who's going to win. When you hear these interviews where somebody's invested a year and a half in a deal, and it either stalls or doesn't close or goes to the competition, that's a year of your career. That's a lot. You don't want to do that. And smaller deals still have these elements, and you want to control that. So, hey, I appreciate everybody listening. If you see me on LinkedIn, give me a little like, a little comment, a little thumbs up, a little share. I'm running out of connections, so don't get upset if I'm not connecting with you. I got to get rid of old connections to make room for you. But you can still follow so you see it. Follow the podcast company page. Just search for it, and you can follow it there. I put all the content up there. The YouTube channel, I store all the interviews in video format there. If you want to see our smiling faces, just search Brian Burns Sales on YouTube. Website is b2brevenue.com. I appreciate you listening. There's 2 other podcasts I want to make sure you're listening to: Sales Questions, Brutally Honest Answers, and the B2B Revenue Leadership Show. We'll see you next time.